Welcome to this episode of Tax People Aren't Boring. And this episode, we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Aleksandra Bal, who is the Indirect Tax Technology Lead at Stripe, but also a contributor for Forbes and author Spectacular. So welcome, Aleksandra. Before we get started, Andrew likes to start the episode with a very important question, which is...
Are tax people boring?
So, are tax people boring, Aleksandra? What's your view?
Of course not.
Of course not. No, and why is that in your experience?
Because tax is not boring. It's such a diverse area. There is so much about it. It affects every business sector. It is constantly changing. So I don't even know how you can think that it's boring.
Actually, I think your title, tax technology, so a tax technologist. But what exactly is a tax technologist, right? Because we sort of fit in that different area. We're not, there's the legal tax side, but we're not IT. We sort of fit in the middle. So what is your interpretation of a tax technologist?
And is that boring?
Well, tax technology is a very broad term. For me, it means someone who understands tax and can also practically implement it in various systems. Okay. So I started my career in a very traditional way, as a tax lawyer working for one of the big four companies in Germany. But then I slowly transitioned to the technology field. So I taught myself programming. Then I did a bachelor in computer science, just to better understand, I would say, the new tax reality. For me, tax is no longer a legal science. It's now more a data science.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
And I like the fact that you say, it's a traditional way into what you do, but actually we found that there is no traditional way. With the people that we've spoken to, some people have gone through accountancy,
chemistry,
English degrees, but found their way into tax. But what is it about wanting to find out about tax technology? What made you go and start learning programming?
Yeah, and actually, as you said, you actually went quite some extremes. You didn't just do a couple of Google searches. You actually got yourself qualifications.
Yeah.
So I've always admired people who could build certain things. For example, software engineers. They can create a working application, and lawyers were just writing down stuff. I also wanted to be more creative, be able to build things. That's why I taught myself coding. And then I realized that I can do a little bit, but I was missing the bigger picture. That's why I signed up for the bachelor program in computer science.
Actually, a question on that. So I do a lot of solution, programming design, but I'm not a programmer. But I know enough, I think, first to be able to sort of do that a wireframe approach, and also to be understand what is possible. How much so people going into sort of the tax technology world or in tax. Obviously, you've gone to, I think, to a certain extreme by doing a full qualification in that area. But what sort of level do you think is enough, and how important is it to have an understanding of the IT, the programming, and ultimately what tax technology sits on?
It's definitely very useful, and it helps you a lot when you have to work with software engineers and with tech folks. However, I wouldn't say it's necessary. Tax technology is a very broad area, and there are people who can be excellent, for example, at project management. And to be a good project manager, you don't need any coding skills. You need a different skill set.
So what did learning about programming and coding help with your understanding of the new era of tax technology, or as you were sort of describing it earlier on? What knowledge gap did that close for you? Was it about being able to communicate in a certain way, or was it to satisfy your own curiosity? Because I can imagine there's lots of different reasons.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I learned is that technology, computer science is extremely difficult. That's why we should never underestimate technology projects and the associated complexity. If you are a lawyer and you write something, well, you always deliver a piece of writing to a client. If you are an engineer, you are building something. And this doesn't work. There is a bug. It just doesn't work. You haven't delivered anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's no room for error, and I think actually being someone that does the design and that initial build, I think there is, when it comes to tax as well, it's you can't cut corners, because particularly if you're building something that is, you know, meant to work sort of globally or meet lots of different country requirements, you have to make sure that you cover all of those. I've seen quite a few situations where I've seen software or tax related software, and you can tell that the person who built it hadn't got a clue about tax. They've obviously taken say a functional design from someone, you know, like who's done tax law, for example, or say this is what I want. They then built it. So on the front end, it may look okay, but actually behind the scenes, it's terrible. I mean, I've even seen hard coded like country specific names for columns when, you know, and you can instantaneously tell which country did that development. Do you find something similar as well, or do you think the level of tax technology and the software being built is getting better, or you know, or do you see that there are gaps still?
There are, and there will always be gaps, and that's because of some inherent problems that we have. One of them is tax rules were not written with coding in mind. Yeah. In tax law, we have a lot of vague concepts and which cannot be implemented in software. Software needs to have very precise instructions what to do. There is no room for vagueness, no room for interpretation. And as you mentioned, we see a lot of cross-country differences. And when you build software that is supposed to work globally, support globally operating companies, you definitely run into these problems.
Yeah. Right. Look. Well, let's go back, because like we're talking about tax now, which is obviously thematic for this podcast. But I'm interested again in your journey to where you are right now, because I think that's what people want to know about Aleksandra. And I know that you started off in tax law, you then went into technology, and you went through this kind of development journey personally with your knowledge and your learning and your education. But where are you now, and what are you looking forward to doing next?
So where I'm now, I'm quite happy. My job is very diverse. In my current role, I make sure that our products are tax compliant. I work a lot with product managers, product designers, engineers, and I enjoy working in this diverse environment because you can learn so many things from everyone. I never try to think what is next, because these things are very hard to predict. And when I look back at my career, it's not like a linear path.
Right. Okay, so explain that a little bit more then, because that's interesting. Why isn't it straightforward? What happened?
So everything started in a very traditional way. I studied tax law. I started working for a Big Four company. And I thought that would be my career path. You are associate, manager, director. But then I realized that this type of work is not for me. Things were very inefficient around me. We only cared about billable hours. Right. For example, I was writing a memo for a client, but someone wrote a memo on exactly the same topic 1 week ago. I didn't know about it. So I had to do the work from scratch. There was absolutely no knowledge management, and I wanted to do something about it, but there was no time for it because we only cared about billable hours.
Right.
I thought, yeah, knowledge management is something very important. Then I changed jobs. I moved to Amsterdam. I started working for International Bureau for Fiscal Documentation, IBFD.
Yeah.
And at that time, they had the first tax knowledge platform.
Yes.
Having spent some time at IBFD, I realized that knowledge provision is very useful. Knowledge management is very important. However, the next step in the tax law evolution is automation. It's not only about provision of information, but you need to automate tax jobs and embed this information in software. That's why I started working for a tax software provider as a product manager. My job was to build a tax reporting solution. I learned a lot in that job, but then again, I thought, what is the bigger picture? I'm only working on tax solutions, but there is a world out there beyond tax. So I would like to see how tax solutions are embedded into broader ecosystems. And I have this opportunity at Stripe because we are a company that provides many different types of solutions. We build the economic infrastructure for the internet, and of course we are well known as a payment provider.
Yeah.
So actually, obviously, I mean, I've spoken to you and some of your team before, and you're very much ahead of the game, I would say, with a lot of companies in how you're thinking about integration of the tax, determination, reporting, compliance. What do you think is the general, with other companies? Do you think companies do enough when it comes to, even adopting tax automation? Do you think all companies should have some sort of form?
Yeah, because you're quite forward thinking, right? Like you get it, like you see the future, you're working towards a better future and knowing that you don't know what comes next and doing everything to make sure you're ready in most eventualities. Is that normal? Is that traditional?
I wouldn't say it's traditional. I think every company would benefit from tax automation, but we should never underestimate the power of tradition and the power of legacy systems.
Yes.
We would like to do new things, but what stops us is the present and the past. We have certain types of system. We can't get rid of them. They are complex. It's, for example, ERP system. It's not only about tax. It affects many different functions.
Yeah.
So often we would like to make a change, but we are not even in a position to make it.
I think a lot of people would resonate with that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but I think that's actually a really important point, for anybody who is designing a tax solution, or there isn't necessarily a one solution fits all. You have to be very dynamic. You also, as you say, you have to look at so many different aspects, even down to how an invoice is going to be printed and the information on that invoice. And I think because of that, I don't think there is necessarily a one solution fits all. Yes, there are products that will work, but it's how you integrate the data as well. I think is really, really important.
But I think it's an attitude thing as well, because you seem to be embracing of the fact that, you've got all of these, not problems, but you've got all of these things that you have to contend with, and you work around them and you find different solutions. And I don't know, I mean, you're more of an expert than me, but I would have said that maybe this is, what is required of somebody working in-house tax these days. That you have to have that kind of focus and that holistic view rather than working in a silo.
Yeah. So how do you find? I mean, you obviously recruit for your team. How do you find the right people? Because I mean, I remember seeing once on LinkedIn there was someone that described themselves as a tax technology guru. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I went past, it was like 2 years. I was like, oh, they were doing retail before that. How do they become a guru in 2 years? So I think there's a lot of people out there that don't do tax technology, but they could be great in tax technology.
Yeah. What do you look for when you're recruiting, or who are the types of people with what kind of characteristics?
Yeah, what skill set,
yeah.
etc.
Yeah, for me, the most important characteristic is the learning mindset. Someone who is genuinely curious and wants to learn new things. Because when you recruit for a job, you need to keep in mind that this job is going to change, and it may change very soon because everything is changing. So I don't like having a checklist with the job requirements and hire someone who matches that checklist. I want someone who is adaptable, who wants to learn, wants to try out new things. And I like people who think in a very unconventional way, because they can come up with new solutions.
Have you got any examples of thinking in that unconventional way, something where yourself or someone in your team has actually solved a problem, or actually done something that's added a lot of value, and it just was very sort of off the wall approach?
Well, it doesn't have to be anything about technology, because quite often I hire people that don't have any technology background. These can be people that are in the very early stages of their career. They were not exposed to tax technology solutions, but I just want to find out how they view it, because there are people who may view technology as a threat. So or say, I'm a lawyer, I want to do only this. Yeah. But if someone doesn't mind and wants to just try, why not?
So it's an aptitude thing as opposed to, and an attitude thing, sorry, I should say, rather than, you've got these core sets of skills. I suppose anybody can be turned into something provided they have the right outlook that you're looking for. And would you say that is a standard across the board? Do other people in your position, when they're hiring, think along the same lines, or are there changes that need to be made when in that area of recruitment?
I think there are some changes that should be made. Many recruiters and tax managers focus too much on the past.
Got ya.
They look at experience, how many years of experience someone has. And for me, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Is there a difference between 5 or 8 years or 10 or 15? This doesn't matter. And I want to hire for a job for the future. A past might be a good predictor of how someone will perform in the future, but that's not the only one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of, we work with lots of different companies, and you have tax sort of managers that are on one side they're aware of the technology. The technology. Maybe they don't know it themselves, but they know it exists, so they want to find out more, and they want to push their systems in that way. And then you have the other side where they literally, I just want to do my job. I don't want change. This is how I do things. They don't think outside the box. And actually, if you've got someone that is, you bring them in, they've got 12 years of doing something always the same. It's like, well, what can they do to your system to make a change, right? Because ultimately, as you say, everything changes, and particularly with tax, one of the things that we know is that like master data is often terrible, processes get forgotten. So there's so many different areas that need to be continuously checked and changed, and no one is really doing anything to put those checks and changes in. And that's why I think sometimes you need that fresh mind, or certainly a mind that's asking questions that you're like, actually,
the curious mind.
That sounds obvious, but what is the answer to that? And it's someone that's, whereas if someone else just goes, oh, this is how it's done, and they don't do anything to challenge it, you're not going to get much more value. Whereas if someone is like, why are we doing it this way? And then, if no one can really answer, then that way should be changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we last spoke, we talked about a few things that we might discuss on this podcast, because there's so much to your background and there's so much that you do. But one of the things that we'd written down was about your involvement with the OECD. And I just wondered whether or not you could give the listeners and viewers
your involvement in OECD, all of the blog posts, the writing for Forbes. There's a lot of stuff that you do that I believe is outside of your 9-to-5 job.
Which is about educating others and your passion there. And I just wondered, could we hear a little bit more about that? Because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and also how did you get into it? How would someone else potentially get into that as well?
So I'm very interested in tax policy, because in the end, the policymakers make the rules that we need to apply. So I collaborate with different organizations, with OECD, with the International Chamber of Commerce, with the European Commission. I just find it very interesting to follow the developments here. And again, the best way to work on those issues is to be curious, to investigate them. And also you need to be proactive. So no one will invite you somewhere. You just need to meet these people, become involved, indicate that you are interested, publish article, speak at events.
So I think that's really invaluable advice, because there will be people that are thinking, well, do you know what, these are the sorts of things that one can do to progress one's career and show, thought leadership, I suppose, outside of their 9-to-5. And I mean, you talked there about the sorts of tips and tricks that you would advise people, that are seeking to do something similar and to get that progression. But what would you say to somebody who maybe feels lacking in confidence to go and do those things?
I would say you should always try. What can happen if you fail? Nothing.
Yeah,
Amen.
I think you're not going to be able to become a YouTube star if you don't do any YouTube videos, right? You have to be doing it, whether you're good or not. Well, I suppose indicate where you go, right? So obviously, if your writing skills weren't very good, you wouldn't be being published in Forbes magazine, for example, right? So I think you have to do it. You have to practice, and I think you have to be continuously be producing good content, I presume, because then you'll build up a following, right?
Yeah, so my main piece of advice would be, don't be afraid of mistakes, but be terrified of giving up, because we mostly regret things that we didn't do. And I haven't been always a great writer. When I wrote my first article, I think that was over 10 years ago, I sent it to a tax journal. The editor called me and said, "This is horrible. We are not going to publish it."
So I hope they gave you some good constructive feedback alongside that.
So it was a very useful experience, because the editor was also very, very friendly, and he explained to me the idea is good, but you have absolutely no idea how to communicate this idea to an international audience. But we can work on that. And yeah, I took his feedback very seriously. I spent quite some time rewriting this article, and it finally got published. But again, the first reaction that I got was, this is horrible, this is not publishable.
I think that's a really important thing for people to hear, because sometimes the fear of failure is the thing that prohibits us from actually moving forwards. But what's your favourite thing, or the thing that you're most proud of with those extra things that you do in your career? So the publishing and do you do much of that? Or?
Yeah, I do that as well. But the thing that I'm most proud of is, I would say, still my transition from tax law to technology. That was like a huge effort. I learned a lot. I invested a lot of my free time into studying computer science, dealing with algorithms. I remember weeks when I built something, there was a bug and it didn't work.
Oh, and then the frustration trying to find it. I think that's interesting as well, though, because that's a massive shift, really, from like going through that whole educational journey in one discipline and then migrating to something completely different in many ways, because it's a completely different skill set.
Yeah. And you work on something for weeks, but it doesn't work. So in the end, you can't submit it, and it is as if you had not done anything.
Yeah, all of it's rendered useless. Yeah.
I think that is something really challenging in the sort of in doing software development, is if you can't make something work, and you're just at that end, you're like, what else can I do? Sometimes it is the concept won't work, but otherwise you've got to go and seek that help. And I think that's really important as well, is that for example, when that person said your article is rubbish, so then as you say, don't give up and say, okay, well, why is it rubbish? What parts can I improve? What it's asking those additional questions. It's not just stopping, and I think that's important everywhere. Even if you're working in a tax department, or you're working in a payables team and you're having to process transactions with tax and things are harder, you've got to challenge it. You've got to raise and say, why are we doing it this way? This doesn't work. Not just accepting the status quo.
Yeah.
So I think that curious mind, I think that's something which we've actually, since we spoke last time, Alex, we've actually now introduced that into our interviewing process to find out what people are actually doing. And it doesn't have to be tax technology from a learning point of view, right? They could be doing flower arranging, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is for somebody to demonstrate resourcefulness, to be able to think around problems and think within the confines of what resources they have available, but thinking around it. But I am curious though, Aleksandra, we talk a lot about tax obviously on this podcast because it's the theme, but what non-tax pursuits do you enjoy? So you've obviously got this educational bug that you need to satisfy, but what do you do outside of work? What hobbies or things have you, because I'm interested to know.
Or is tax so interesting that's what you do?
Yeah, tax is very interesting, but there is also life beyond tax.
Amen.
So I have now a new function in my company. So I'm the experience lead for the Netherlands, which means I'm responsible for planning our parties.
Wow.
Okay, so now we can talk the same language, Aleksandra. This is good, thank you. Yeah, I need a little bit more information though. What kind of parties are we talking about?
Different kind of parties. So I'm now responsible for planning experiences for our Amsterdam office. So now I'm busy with a summer party, but we have then a winter party. We have happy hours.
Yeah. So what sort of things do you come up with for these experiences?
Because
I need to recommend these to Andrew.
Do you do it just to go and get drunk and forget things, or do you actually try and as you say, an experience? Do you actually try and do something that's around like team building or trying to introduce a new skill at all?
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, I think getting drunk would be very easy. So I try to be more creative. Well, there are a lot of possibilities. Escape rooms, VR games, other VR experiences.
Right, I'm going to write some notes down, Aleksandra, because I'm going to be feeding these through to our employee engagement people at work, because they're currently planning our summer party. I think we did an escape room, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, I was in Andrew's escape room.
Yeah, but you refused to do the most complex one because
No. Aleksandra, what it was, we did an escape room. Andrew could not wait to be given the green light to go. So at the beginning they have like a safety video and you have to listen to it, yeah? Andrew doesn't, apparently, because he was already pulling open
Yeah, I
drawers.
found
I'm like,
most of
Andrew!
the stuff ready, and then someone else told me and briefed me what the safety requirements were. So I just got ahead of the game, and of course we got out in record time.
And he got told off. So,
yeah, I may get told off. I'm used to that. I'm married. So
well, yeah, let's talk about family life actually, because I remember when we last spoke as well, you talked about your kids, and they've got some funny traits when you're on calls to the US, I understand.
Yeah, I have 3 boys at home. They are 8, 7, and 4. And sometimes they are very keen to join my Zoom calls and interact a bit with my colleagues.
In what way,
yeah,
Aleksandra?
come on, you got to explore this a little bit more. What exactly do they say?
Well, they can only speak Dutch, which is a good thing because other people cannot understand them.
Yeah, I hear they
And it's
don't
good that
necessarily
other
say
people cannot
nice
understand
words,
them.
do they? So
Colourful language, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
I like that.
How
This
do you
is
keep a
mischievous.
straight face when a 4-year-old is swearing in Dutch to an American, your American boss, for example? How does that work?
I think no one has ever realized what the kids are actually doing, so everyone
Well, they will
thinks
now. They will now. If anybody watches this.
Well, this is a hits on another interesting point, because of course you're not going to be the only person that's got relatively young children, sort of mums and dads that might be working. How do you manage that? Because you've obviously got quite a full-on job, you've got all of these additional things that you do. What's your advice to somebody that's wanting to progress but also wanting to spend time with their families?
Yeah, I think you can do many things, but the key term here is balance. You need to make sure that everything is balanced, that if something becomes too much for you, then you need to stop. Then there is no balance, and if you struggle, you will fail. So know your limits. Don't go beyond your limits. Some people can be very busy having only a job. Some people can manage a job and a hobby and even a family, but it varies per person. So you need to know your situation and your limits.
I think that's a really nice way of putting it, actually.
Yeah. Actually, just lighten the mood a little bit in terms. So I've got a question here for you. So we've obviously talked about family, your boys. What's the worst name that you've heard given to a child?
The worst name?
Like a celebrity's child.
Well, any just the worst name that you've heard.
I think many celebrities' children's names are horrible. I can't think the worst one, but when I think of all Kim Kardashian's kids, North Chicago, Saint and Psalm, well...
Oh my God, but you can name them.
These are good candidates.
But you can name them, Aleksandra. Are you a Keeping Up with the Kardashians fan then, I take it?
I'm not a fan, but sometimes I like watching this stuff just to, watch something that is utterly stupid.
Yeah, no, my wife does the same thing. I'm like, how can you watch this rubbish? And she's like, because I don't have to think.
It's compelling. No, it is compelling. I used to be absolutely sort of staunch against this. I used to think it was brain rot, but I have to say I am a convert. I love watching the Kardashians. If only to sort of like imagine what my life might look like if I didn't work at Innovate. No, I'm only joking, Andrew. I love that kind of.
No, I do think that it is interesting though. I think if you've got something where, particularly if you're in a job, tax, for example, is quite challenging, you do need to have to be able to just take that brain out of it completely, recharge it, refresh it, so you can come back with new ideas, challenges.
It's important not to think sometimes. I think if you're constantly thinking, you get burnout. But Aleksandra, what's the most interesting or ridiculous fact that you know? Have you got anything that most people don't know?
All that learning you've done, there's got to be something in there that's completely useless, but you know it.
Well, I learned a lot of stuff when I was studying computer science, but unfortunately I cannot think of anything right now, or if I try to explain, we would need another podcast. It doesn't make sense. But I think things that I find extremely ridiculous or insane, it's usually bureaucracy or red tape. I must say I have a very low tolerance for bullshit.
Yes.
So if I'm faced with inefficient processes, too much red tape, or simply lack of common sense, that's difficult for me.
Actually, talking about when the bullshit side of things, when something is happening, you're like, it shouldn't be this way. How often do you find, like, when you challenge it, that no one else really has, or someone has challenged it before, but they've just accepted a sort of a lame answer, and and then that's it, they just accepted it. How important is it to if you think something has been done in the wrong way, how important is it to keep going until you either get the change or something happens? And how do you get that change?
You've asked like 5 questions there, poor Aleksandra.
Alex is an extremely smart person.
Well, let's start with the first one. So that was about what? I've forgotten now. It was so long ago.
How do you be dogmatic in making sure that change happens when you find a very bad process?
Yeah, so there can be a lot of bad process around you, but you always need to think what you can influence and what not. So some time ago, I saw a very useful diagram, and these were just 2 circles. A very small circle, which was called what you can influence, and a larger circle around it, what you are interested in. We are interested in fixing many processes, but often we can't do anything about them because they were defined by someone above our level. I think it's useful to provide feedback, but if we try to change something that we cannot, we would just get annoyed. So I always try to find this balance between the sphere of your interests and the sphere of your influence, where you can actually make a change.
So now I'm going to re-dub you, Aleksandra. You're tax lawyer, tax technologist, writer, author, party planner, and lifestyle guru. Because you've got all of the advice. You need to become a coach and offer. Do you know what? Maybe this should be a theme for your next piece of writing. Is how to get the balance right, and yeah.
I thought you would say I should write something about Kim Kardashian.
Oh, and Kim Kardashian.
No one will read that because you have to be brain dead. You have to empty your mind.
Be careful because
you have to watch, not read.
You'll get
unless I think when they've written about that before, I think they've been comic books, haven't they? I think that's the level.
Oh, maybe, who knows? Right, well, we're going to start wrapping up towards the end of the podcast now, but what we'd like to do is ask you a final question. Andrew, have you got one on your list?
Yeah, if you were a superhero, what would your power be?
Oldie but a goodie, that question.
I think the power that I would like to have is to read people's thoughts.
Oh,
I don't.
You should get quite depressed. I know that. I would get depressed with what people think of me.
To what end? Why?
Because that would be very interesting. Often people don't say what they think, and it's much easier when you know about it. So I'm a very authentic person, and I know that some people get irritated about it because I always tell them what I think.
Yeah, but honesty is the best policy, I suppose. I mean, and you've met a soulmate in Andrew then, because I don't think Andrew's ever held his tongue.
Yeah, I don't have a filter,
no,
really. No, but I think that part of it is I'm too busy to waste time, and I know what needs to happen. I want people to get on with doing it or come up with ideas. And if you don't, I think we have so much bureaucracy, as you mentioned earlier, so much bureaucracy in life now. Everything is slowed down because we have to protect ourselves from the few, in terms of someone burning themselves, with a hot, drinking a hot cup of tea, and you have to put labels on it, and you have to do everything else.
I have no idea where he's going with this analogy.
It's like the McDonald's cup where they got sued because someone burnt themselves. But the point being is that you have to do so much more to protect yourself, whether it's legally or from compliance point of views. And I think sometimes you've got to just speak openly and just say, this is what I need.
Right, I'm going to speak openly now. I have no idea what that was all about, but it sounded good.
What I'm trying to say is that we sort of we don't say what we want, and therefore meetings quite often don't get concluded because people aren't actually being open about what they really think.
No,
or they're too scared to say.
It's good to be assertive. It's good to be honest, always in a kind way. I think that's probably the thing here.
Yeah, but if you can read people's mind, you know if your kids are planning something naughty.
They always are. You don't have to read their mind. They always are, particularly boys.
But then you know what exactly they're up to.
Do you know what? If my mum had that skill, that power when I was growing up, I'm just going to make the sign of the
Yeah.
cross right now, okay. Look, Aleksandra, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And what we'll try and do as well in the podcast description and the video description, include some links to some of the stuff that you've written, because I think people would it'd be good for people to follow you and keep abreast of everything that you've got to say, because it's obviously industry shaping.
I think Alex has got a huge following already. I think that's
well, let's make it even huger.
Yeah,
that's even the one. So thanks so much, Aleksandra. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was quite a fun to chat with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.